Hi, and welcome to Schema Stories. I'm Martha Van Berkel, and I'm the co-founder of Schema app. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Jarno van Driel over in Europe, who's going to be talking a bit about his experience and sharing his story. Welcome, Jarno.
Good afternoon. At least for me it is. But
yeah,
it's still
morning
here.
For you. So we're going to start. Just tell us a bit about yourself, Jarno, and maybe a bit about your background doing schema markup and in the semantic search space.
For the first 10 years of my career, I've been a front-end developer focused on accessibility. And from that point of view, I already worked a lot on semantic HTML. See the benefits of that. And when around 2008, 2009, Drupal announced they would be implementing RDFA into their core assets, that actually was the moment I got triggered because of the background I had as an accessibility developer, and with all the semantics that come from that, I got quickly interested in Schema.org, or at least that day RDFA. Schema.org didn't exist yet. Played around with that for a couple of years and moved on to Schema.org once that was released. And I applied that to my work and daily work actually ever since 2010 more or less.
Excellent. And tell us a bit about sort of the type of work that you've done, because you've done sort of a diversity of things since then.
No, for the first 4 or 5 years of the Schema work, I've been mostly focusing on helping out other folks, small business companies. And for my day-to-day work, I mainly do SEO for big-level e-commerce companies. And in that setting, I use it most of all to help organize the content within the organization.
You've told me offline a couple times that you call yourself a hobbyist, but it sounds like from your background that that's absolutely not true. It's a core part of what you do every day.
It's a core part of what I do every day, but that's also to really come to grips with the whole semantic technology. I didn't have a formal education in this, so I'm learning it as I go. And over the last 10 years, I've come to a decent level, but still, if I talk to folks who are deep into the linked data world, then I still found out easily there are plenty of areas where I still have to learn. So from that regard, I call myself a hobbyist, or simply because I'm well aware I don't know everything. Even after 10 years, I'm still learning almost on a daily basis. So and from that point of view, I run a community with another Canadian SEO, Aaron Bradley. And there we help out a lot of folks with their structured data issues. And by doing so, I get to understand more and more about it as well, and especially see the needs as they arise in the industry, and take that back to my volunteers work for Schema.org, the organization.
Yeah, and if people don't know, the Google Plus semantic search community is an amazing resource. So Jarno and Aaron do a fantastic job both sharing information about what's changing, as well as helping junior and novice people like me and experts all around the world. And I totally hear you, Jarno, when you're saying like you don't have a background in semantic tech and all the linked data, because I'm the same as you, right? And I spend all my day with Mark, my co-founder, who has that background and that education in that space. And I feel like sometimes we speak different languages as someone who sort of does it versus someone who's like learned all the technology behind it.
Being involved with so many people that actually studied the technology behind it officially. I come from a usability background, in the sense that I look at something and I have to figure out how can I apply this, that there's actually some corporate sense in doing that. And when you got a formal background, you're doing it because of what you know of the technology.
Totally.
Those are two different worlds. So I'm more worried on a day-to-day basis of how can I turn this into something that's profitable.
Excellent. So kind of using that view and also sort of seeing sort of what you see in sort of your day-to-day and sort of the larger e-commerce space, and then the day-to-day sort of questions you get on the community. What do you think the market is challenged with today? And sort of, if you can sort of do a dichotomy between sort of, the SEO and sort of people doing the work and maybe even enterprise adoption. What are your thoughts on sort of what's holding back the market maybe from adopting this further or faster?
I think the biggest issue is firsthand is people looking too much to the direct ROI of implementing Schema.org. The expectation is out there that once you start applying Schema.org, you're suddenly going to have 1,000 add-ons in search, and that's not reality. It's still a very limited subset of Schema.org that actually has a visual ROI in search. The issue in proper implementation is knowledge level. Although with the coming of JSON-LD, the knowledge you need to be able at least to write the markup itself, that has been simplified. But in general, Schema.org gets applied as an afterthought. And when you do it that way, people often start to complain, but I can't do this properly because my website hasn't been built this way, or I don't have access to that information. What the industry needs to become aware of is that you need to apply Schema.org, or at least use the vocabulary at the moment when you're starting to design a website, or when you're trying to come up with a good content page, so that you actually thought about the type of information you want to present and how you should structure it. So you also, before you publish anything or create anything, actually can stop to think, do I have access to everything I need? And the biggest issue with Schema.org often is that people start to apply it and then discover, oh, information I needed. And that's where a lot of hidden value comes from Schema.org, is that it helps you organize your website. It helps you create very clear topical pages. And because you made your data model more complex a bit, if you create a data model of a page and you look at it and you inventorize whether or not you have all the elements, even if you don't apply the Schema.org markup itself, the fact that you've structured it and enriched your pages according to a certain content type or content model, that helps you get good results in search. And it helps you create pages that actually inform people well as well.
Love it. So not only use Schema.org for the SEO, but use it as a way to think, as a thinking process to organize your thoughts and present your data. Love it.
Exactly.
Any other challenges you think, like in the enterprise space, sort of, or sort of like as companies get bigger, do you see sort of other pieces, or is that also tied to ROI?
The biggest issue, in my experience, for big organizations is that there's always a constant struggle to resources to any given project. And there are always 20,000 different stakeholders who want things done within the organization, and everybody needs budget, and there's only budget for so many people. So the biggest challenge within big organizations is how can you sell your project in regard to structured data and make it so that other stakeholders actually agree to push your project in front of their projects. So the biggest issue in large environments is most of all getting enough stakeholders on board that actually believe there's an ROI, or it makes sense, there's added benefit process of structuring your data, and in the end also publishing structured data. So
selling the value and influencing the stakeholders. It sounds like the same type of challenges we've had for years trying to get people to adopt technology.
Yeah, but the unique thing about big e-commerce environments or large publishers is that they're talking about big environments with often a multitude of databases that need to be in sync. Databases that don't always have the values you need, or they're not stored in a way you need. So besides trying to add the information to the website, you actually need to find stakeholders that are willing to invest in their database systems to write certain scripts to get the information out of those database systems. So getting that on the front end, in the end, 90% of the struggle isn't getting that information on the page itself, but everything behind it to get to that point so that you can publish it. That's 90% of the work.
Got it. So you talked a bit about sort of like the use cases today are limited with Google. Where do you think this is all going? Like, what do you think the future of sort of leveraging this structured data and vocabulary will be used in the future?
In a very organic manner, Schema.org itself has started to evolve more and more as the central hub for linked data. In the early days, vocabularies were all distributed. You had hundreds, maybe even thousands of different vocabularies, and it was very difficult to find the one you needed. And in the beginning, Schema.org, a small subset of at least the things search engines are interested in. And that has started to grow now to a point where we actually have industry-specific extensions to Schema.org. And we're putting pieces to the puzzle in places so that we can also connect Schema.org to external enumerations, external vocabularies. So in that regard, as opposed to being one of many, Schema.org is now starting to become a central hub where you start with Schema.org and you start to plug in additional vocabularies as the need arises. From a pure Google point of view, I think the message is a little bit mixed, because when you look at Webmaster Hangouts, you often hear, now we only use those parts which we use for rich snippets, for example. But when you listen to Google Hangouts, you're only listening to one part of Google, and that's especially focused on the actual webmasters. But if you're looking at Google Maps, if you're looking at Google Images, there are all kinds of areas within Google that are starting to use structured data as well. And when you look at those Webmaster Hangouts, Webmaster Office Hours Hangouts, then you often don't get that information because they're just sitting there from and they're not talking about what Google Image or Google Maps is doing. And recently, Google Images has started to show all kinds of product information with product images. And that's all driven by structured data. That's a message you don't get to hear from the Office Hours Hangout.
Yeah.
But so you have to look around to see which parts of Google are using which areas. Next to that, Google is also more and more using it as a training set to start their artificial intelligence in certain areas. So when there's sufficient markup to be able to recognize pattern, their AI can study the information that's there and start to apply those structures to natural language processing and getting the information that way out of websites.
Can you talk a bit more about that, Jarno, and kind of expand on like why that's important?
In the long run, Google wants to be free of having to parse any syntax at all. They want to be able to understand web pages the way we digest them. They want to look at the language, they want to read the message. And thank you. Give me a fresh cup of coffee.
Wonderful.
What was I saying? Oh yeah. It's a training set. Google is reading a web page and need to make sense of what they're seeing. We humans process that in a certain way, and a schema word vocabulary allows you to express those same relations we make in our brain when we see those different elements on a web page. And that helps them to understand the way web pages are built. And on top of that, they're using natural language processing to see, okay, if we parse this page, for example, and we do it with natural language processing, and we parse this page looking at it from a structured data point of view, do the two data sets we end up with coincide with each other?
Excellent.
And by comparing it from that level, they can start on a very simplistic level by a product teaser on an e-commerce site or an article on a web page. And once they've got their basis right, they can start expanding their natural language processing algorithms because they know their foundation is correct. They actually understand what's there.
And so do you think
yeah.
It's amazing, right? And then they get smarter and smarter to be able to figure out that translation of content.
I'm convinced it's not going to be long until SEOs are going to be having an issue with coming to grips with everything Google is doing at the same time. It's going at a velocity and an increasing velocity that it's ever more hard to keep up with. I think within the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to become a point where we are only seeing a very small tip of the iceberg in regards to the knowledge, to Google's knowledge graph from what they're doing with it. I don't think we can keep up, especially as AI is going to be to Google more and more as those algorithms become available.
Do you have any idea what that might look like? You know, like what, I don't know, if when Jarno is sitting back and not thinking about how to structure data, you know, do you think about sort of what those AI use cases might be, what search might look like in three years?
Then I need to take it back to the original idea of the semantic web to start with. When there was first talk about the semantic web or the Web 3.0 term, the idea was that we could start delivering information without needing any vessels. And in that regard, a website is a vessel. It contains information, but we need to present it in a web page. And the entire idea behind the semantic web is that we can deliver a message, content, depending on the relevancy and the intent of the person, without being dependent on the fact whether it's a PDF or whether it's in a website. You just can present the information. And as knowledge graphs start to grow, knowledge lakes, oceans, if you want to call them, there's going to be less and less and less need to actually have a website. I saw a presentation about a month ago, 10 years into the future, and he made a good statement during that presentation where he said, who knows, maybe in 10 years we don't even need websites anymore. data out there in a format that other organizations or other algorithms or parsers can understand it, so they can reorganize that information and serve it to their clients in the way it's being asked for.
Yeah, and it's sort of what we're seeing already with as basic things as Google Answers, right? And so, people are
Exactly.
looking for the information, and Google's saying like, well, why am I going to make you click for it? When you think back to your background and that customer experience, why not just give them the answer they're looking for so that they can do the next thing in their life that they want to do?
Yeah, and I think businesses shouldn't focus on whether that's costing them their traffic, because if such a small snippet of information was sufficient to satisfy that client, it wasn't a good customer to track to the website anyway. It wasn't the type of customer you were going to convert on. But you do, however, want to know that you do want people to know that your site is the one that contains that valuable information. So if Google is able to present a lot of interesting snippets from your website, there's going to come a point where people start to become brand aware.
Exactly.
And more often, they'll start to directly visit your website or your social media pages because they've seen you show up in those answer cards, and because they become aware you actually have very valuable information.
Mm-hmm. And so in future,
so it's a form of branding.
Yeah, I love that. So in future, SEOs might not be managing the search engine optimization of websites, but they might be actually trying to just manage the findability of data. Is that sort of a good translation?
Exactly. It's going to be managing your data, and sure, there's always going to be formats you need to present it in. So there's always going to be social media experts and always going to be website experts. But in the end, I think SEOs in general need to focus much more on data, both on the publishing side as well as their analysis side. 10 years from now, the only thing we're going to be doing is looking at dashboards and having AI analyze our to the exceptions within the anomaly. So I can't get it out of my mouth. Sorry, anomalies of your data sets.
Yeah,
I joke. Those are things where AI really helps.
I always joke that with much as people think they're doing schema markup, they're actually building knowledge graphs, and that's sort of the beginning of that evolution, right? As they start connecting their information. So I just have one more question, sort of, through your work, is there anything that's been like most surprising that's happened in like this area of the semantic web and schema markup and schema.org? Other than your schema ninja shirt showing up, of course, right?
Sure. I think the biggest value so far I see very little chatter about during all those years is the long-term effects of having organized data on your web pages. One of the things I've noticed for the last 6 or 7 years already, especially the big projects I've been working on, that once you've got highly structured pages that have sufficient data, and you publish that information in structured data, you suddenly start to get very steady visitor patterns. Creating a surge, it's not creating a drop. It's the most sites I've worked on extensive projects, I've seen traffic stabilize. And to create any form of growth for an organization, you first need to be in a very consistent position. And that's what it really helps with. It helps you create a good foundation that you can build upon. And that's a value of schema.org almost nobody's talking about. Everybody's talking about the rich snippets and the new types of things you can mark up in schema.org. They're too zoomed in. Actually, people need to zoom out and focus on what can it do for my organization as a whole. That's where it's, for me, where its true value lies.
Well, that's why we have these conversations, Jarno, so we can share that story and help people kind of step out of the day-to-day to kind of look at that bigger picture. So we're actually out of time. So thank you so much for your time today. If people want to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
A lot of different ways. You can reach me on Twitter. You can reach me on Semantic Search Marketing, the community in Google+. Those are the most easiest way to get a hold of me, especially on the community. I'm active there on a daily basis. I'm a moderator there, so if you're in a hurry to catch me, join the community, and you can get a hold of me really fast.
Wonderful. Well, I'll add that link in the description so everyone can find that really easily. Thank you so much, Jarno. And this is Martha Van Berkel bringing you another Schema story, this time from Jarno van Driel out of the Netherlands. Thank you, Jarno, for sharing that future state and how we should all step back and think about the other values of doing schema markup and how that will help us stabilize and build a foundation so that we can then do other things to help us grow.
Thank you. You too.